It's a big week for Jay-Z. His Rock Nation is geared up to produce the most watched live performance of the year, the Super Bowl halftime show. And of course, he was there to cheer on his wife, who took home the coveted award of Album of the Year at this year's Grammys. So in light of all of that, he's also making a surprising move in his ongoing back and forth with Tony Buzbee. Now at this point, we all know who the Texas-based attorney is. You know, the same one who said that he had more than 100 accusers ready to file lawsuits against Diddy.
The lights of the entertainment world have always shined brightest on Diddy and Jay-Z, two titans of hip-hop, two moguls who built empires from the ground up. But tonight, those same lights are revealing something else, something dark, something that was never meant to see daylight. The world is finally beginning to glimpse the disturbing reality behind the power, the money, and the fame, because now, their hidden lives, the secrets they spent decades protecting, are coming apart, piece by piece.
After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases.
And of course, we know later that Jane Doe, who is being represented by the Texas attorney, filed a suit a couple weeks after this press conference accusing Diddy of raping her when she was just 13 years old. Then amended that complaint weeks later, adding Jay-Z, Sean Carter's name to that child rape lawsuit alongside Diddy. A female celebrity was also mentioned in that complaint as well. However, her identity has since remained a mystery. Since that happened, first, let me say both Sean Combs and Sean Carter have denied those accusations. Diddy's team said, quote, "In court, the truth will prevail, that Mr. Combs never sexually assaulted or trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor." Meanwhile, Jay-Z made a scathing statement of denial, mainly targeting Tony Buzbee. He said in part, quote, "My lawyer received a blackmail attempt called a demand letter from a lawyer named Tony Buzbee. What he had calculated was the nature of these allegations and the public scrutiny would make me want to settle. No, sir, it had the opposite effect. It made me want to expose you for the fraud you are in a very public fashion. So no, I will not give you one red penny." Now that statement went on to call Tony Buzbee a deplorable human, a man with no valor, and an ambulance chaser in a cheap suit. Now while Diddy sits in a jail cell awaiting trial, by the way, pleaded not guilty to those charges, denies all the accusations made in the various lawsuits, Jay-Z and Tony Buzbee have been going back and forth with lots of motions filed, complaints filed, and accusations flying on both ends. The Jane Doe alleging she was raped by Diddy and Jay-Z went on NBC, where they pointed out consistencies in her account of what happened, including that her father picked her up after the alleged rape. Her father later told NBC he didn't recall that. She claimed she spoke to a celebrity there, but that celeb wasn't even in New York at that time. And photos showed Diddy and Jay-Z at different locations than the Jane Doe described. Now that interview happened in mid-December. By the end of that month, Jay-Z sued Buzbee for defamation and extortion. Jay-Z's legal team has also been pushing for the Jane Doe to not hide under anonymity. And of course, Jay-Z's lawyers have been trying to get his name off that child rape lawsuit or just have it dismissed altogether. Now a judge ruled that she can proceed anonymously for now, but scolded Jay-Z's attorneys for their combative motions and inflammatory language used against Tony Buzbee. Then in January, a legal petition was filed by a Texas man who is represented by Tony Buzbee, who also accused Jay-Z's lawyers of bribing people to sue Buzbee and his law firm. So a lot's happened. Now in a surprising move, Jay-Z's lawyer Alex Spiro is seemingly softening up on Buzbee. In a letter to Judge Annalisa Torres, the same one who previously scolded him, Spiro wrote, quote, "Dear Judge Torres, we write on behalf of defendant Sean Carter to respectfully request that Mr. Carter's motion for sanctions pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 11 be withdrawn at this time without prejudice. We have discussed this matter with counsel for plaintiff who consents to this submission and agrees the withdrawal is without prejudice."
With a whisper, industry insiders began to talk, quietly, cautiously, about strange connections, private meetings, and hidden dealings that linked Diddy and Jay-Z far deeper than the public ever imagined. For years, they were painted as rivals, two kings of the same throne, competing for dominance in music and business. But what if that rivalry was a front? What if behind closed doors, they weren't competitors at all, but collaborators in a world of secrecy and silence? As more people started to speak, the narrative began to shift. Former associates, assistants, even security personnel began to describe moments that didn't add up: late-night parties in hidden mansions, private jets with sealed manifests, mysterious disappearances of individuals who once worked for them. And when those individuals resurfaced, they never spoke again. The silence wasn't just suspicious, it was chilling. Diddy's reputation had already begun to crumble under the weight of mounting allegations, from lawsuits to leaked testimonies painting him as a man consumed by control and chaos. But when Jay-Z's name started appearing in the same documents, the entire industry froze.
End of this ongoing legal saga, and we could hear more very soon. Let's unpack this further with attorney and litigator Rich Schoenstein. Rich, always great to see you. What's your reaction to this move done by Jay-Z's lawyer, Alex Spiro? Are you surprised that he asked the judge to drop the motion for sanctioning Tony Busby?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised because, asking for sanctions is a pretty aggressive move. And so to turn around and withdraw that motion is a notable retreat from that move. So I wasn't expecting it. And the question is, why did they do it? And I would assume that's what we're going to talk about.
Definitely. And I, also want to ask, this letter said they want to withdraw it without prejudice. Why is that part important?
Well, without prejudice just means they could bring it again. So you can either withdraw a motion with prejudice, which means it's resolved and we can't bring it again, or without prejudice, which means the court doesn't have to deal with this now, but we're not waiving our rights. We're going to save the right to bring the motion again at a later time.
And, as you just mentioned before, I guess we're going to get into, why was this move even done in the first place? Now, Jay-Z's lawyer was previously scolded by that same judge for using inflammatory language against Tony Busby. But do you think that this is a part of a new strategy not to be harsh on the Jane Doe lawyer, instead hope to just get this suit dismissed instead?
Possibly. So that first thing you mentioned about the judge's reaction, I have three theories about why this was withdrawn. And the first one is exactly what you said. The judge has already indicated on the record that she's not thrilled with the way the attorneys are going at each other in this. And no judge is. No judge wants to make a case about conflict between the lawyers. Lawyers end up skirmishing all the time. They don't like each other all the time. They accuse each other of bad stuff all the time. And no judge wants the case to be about that. The judge wants the case to be about the merits, about the claims, about the parties, not about the lawyers. So she dressed down the lawyers at one point about this kind of activity, and it's possible that they have withdrawn the motion because they just don't think the judge is going to really consider it, given her predisposition. That's one possibility.
And what's your other possibility?
Well, I have two other possibilities, and there could be a mix of the three. The second possibility that occurred to me is, for some reason, the people who brought the motion, and that's the Quinn Emanuel firm, no longer think the motion is that strong. It's possible they've evaluated things. It's possible, they were claiming that the plaintiffs didn't vet the claims enough and made representations in the complaint that could not have been true. And maybe with further analysis, they've come to a view.
These weren't just accusations anymore. They were revelations, tying together years of unexplained behavior, shadowy business deals, and disturbing personal accounts. Sources close to both camps describe a web of power that extended beyond music. It was about influence, in fashion, in media, even in politics. Diddy and Jay-Z were gatekeepers, controlling who rose and who fell, and anyone who threatened that system, they disappeared from the spotlight, often permanently. But the real shock came when insiders began to speak about their private circles, exclusive gatherings that blurred the line between celebration and corruption, events where celebrities, influencers, and executives would mingle, and where, according to those who escaped them, morality had no place. What happened in those rooms was never meant to leave them. But now, testimonies are surfacing, and they're painting a picture that's hard to believe and impossible to ignore. One former industry insider described the atmosphere as a cult of power. It wasn't about the music anymore.
And it's really not the kind of attention either one of them wants. The two rap moguls have known one another for years and years. They've supported one another in business, and now they're named as defendants together in a civil lawsuit filed by a woman who claims both men raped her when she was 13 in the year 2000. I'll get to the latest on that case in a bit. But first, I want to get to the most recent developments in Sean Combs' federal criminal case. It involves his lawyers and the freak-offs that he engaged in with his ex, Cassie Ventura. Combs, as I've told you many times, faces very serious federal charges of racketeering, sex trafficking by coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has, of course, pleaded not guilty to those charges and has insisted he is innocent. Now, one of the major pieces of evidence in this case, as far as the sex trafficking charge is concerned, are videos of Cassie Ventura having sex with male sex workers as Combs watched. They're called freak-offs, and Combs' attorneys say they've now watched the tapes, and they say they prove he is innocent. Combs' lawyers wrote in a letter to the court, the 9 videos at issue are the so-called freak-off tapes with victim 1 that the government has repeatedly referenced, causing wild speculation in the media. Contrary to what the government has led this court and the public to believe, the so-called freak-offs were private sexual activity between fully consenting adults in a long-term relationship. Like many Americans in the privacy of their own bedrooms, they sometimes filmed their sexual activity. These videos unambiguously show that the person alleged in the indictment to be victim 1 not only consented, but thoroughly enjoyed herself. Now, the public found out about the freak-offs after Cassie Ventura filed a civil suit against Sean Combs in November of 2023. Ventura said Combs forced her to set up the freak-offs and to hire male sex workers, and that the freak-offs sometimes went on for days. Combs would watch and masturbate, according to Ventura and federal prosecutors. Now, part of the government's case involves the allegation that Combs used these freak-off tapes to control Cassie Ventura, to keep her from leaving him. Combs' team says that's not true. They write, the recordings also directly refute the allegations that Mr. Combs kept these videos as collateral. These recordings were not on Mr. Combs' devices and were not seized from his homes. Rather, victim 1 kept these videos on her own device for years and produced them to the government herself. Now, the government was not happy that this letter was filed with so much detail. Some of it was redacted, but much of it was not. Federal prosecutors wrote to the judge, under the protective order, no portion of the videos should have been filed on the public docket without being filed under seal or without the defense first conferring with the government as to the designation. Neither occurred. Instead of conferring in advance or redacting all content related to the videos, the motion blatantly violated the protective order when it left unredacted descriptions and characterizations of material designated AEO.
Connection wasn't born from friendship, but from a shared understanding. Both knew too much about each other to ever walk away. And that's what makes this so explosive, because as Diddy's legal troubles mount, as investigations dig deeper into his life, the walls around that silence are starting to crack. People are talking, documents are leaking, old footage is resurfacing, and every new piece connects another dot, a pattern that leads straight to Jay-Z. There are whispers of joint ventures that were never publicly declared, of offshore accounts, of individuals paid to ensure that certain stories never reached the press. One whistleblower even claimed that several high-profile scandals over the years were strategically buried through mutual cooperation between their teams, an unspoken pact to protect one another at all costs. But that protection is fading fast. Diddy's empire is collapsing under legal pressure, and as he scrambles to defend himself, names are starting to fall from his lips, names that have the potential to destroy careers, families, even legacies. And among those names, Jay-Z has come up more than once.
Using his businesses to commit a number of crimes, including arson, kidnapping, and robbery. RICO is basically organized crime. Robin Nunn is a lawyer who practices in federal courts. So, Robin, does Diddy's argument that Cassie was somehow enjoying herself during these freak-offs, does that help him, or does it really boil down to whose testimony the jury believes?
Combs' defense is typical of what you would expect someone who is accused of a crime like this to state. The videos, obviously, I have not seen yet, and I doubt they depict one way or the other whether or not the individuals were actually enjoying themselves. I think that it is a common defense to say that there was obviously no crime being committed, and that's exactly what he's saying here.
But it will be up to the jury. And there's really another piece of this case, and that's the racketeering case. And they don't really talk about that. Diddy's attorneys, Sean Combs' attorneys, they stay away from the racketeering part of this. They are focused solely on the sex trafficking part of this case.
Yeah, I think that the idea there, Anjanette, is if they can show that there was actually no rape, no trafficking, no crime, then the racketeering RICO charges all sort of float away. Whether that's true or not, I don't know if I agree, but I think that their defense is to kind of take these crimes apart and knock them off. And if they argue that Cassie is enjoying herself, that this is consensual, that there is no one who is there against their will, and that they had consent, that they can begin to chip away at the RICO charges, because you need an underlying crime in order for there to be actually RICO.
Now, in Las Vegas, Sean Combs' name is coming up in the case of the man accused of ordering the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur. Prosecutors have filed a new transcript of a secretly recorded interview with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis and Las Vegas Metro Police from 2009. In that interview, Keefe D says that Combs wanted Death Row Records co-founder Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur dead and offered money to have the hit carried out. But Keefe D says he never got the money. Keefe D is trying to get the case thrown out. Sean Combs has denied any involvement in the murder for many years now. Sean Combs also faces a new civil lawsuit, this one filed in New York by a woman who claims Combs sexually assaulted her when she was a 16-year-old babysitter in the year 2000. The suit claims the woman worked as a babysitter in the same building where Combs' romantic partner at the time, listed only as a well-known woman, lived.
Behind the scenes, sources say Jay-Z's camp is in full panic mode. Lawyers are tightening security, publicists are scrubbing mentions, and allies are quietly distancing themselves. Beyoncé, once seen as untouchable royalty, is reportedly furious, determined to protect her image at all costs as her husband's name becomes entangled in the chaos. And yet, even as the world watches, both men remain eerily silent. Diddy's representatives deny everything, calling it a witch hunt. Jay-Z's team insists there's no truth to the rumors, but silence, in this case, speaks volumes, because if there's one thing both men have mastered, it's control over their image, their influence, and the narrative that surrounds them. But now, that control is slipping. What's emerging is not just a scandal, it's a reckoning, a look into the dark underbelly of fame where loyalty is currency, where secrets are traded for survival, and where even the most powerful men can't escape the truth forever. As the investigations continue, more files are expected to be unsealed, files that could finally expose the full extent of their connection. For years,
there had been rumblings that Celebrity B is actually Jennifer Lopez, who was Diddy's girlfriend at the time, but that has not been confirmed. What has been confirmed, though, at least according to Jane Doe, is that Celebrity A is Jay-Z. In December, Jane Doe amended her lawsuit to publicly name Jay-Z, alleging he raped her that night. And again, reminder, she's only 13 at the time. Jay-Z completely denies these allegations. He's made a motion earlier this month even for Jane Doe to reveal her identity. And that's not the first time we've seen this tactic, and the last time it actually worked. We reported on this too. The original Jane Doe, who filed civil suit against Diddy in late 2023, the one who included pictures in her lawsuit, was just recently ordered to reveal her name publicly. And that's when we learned that Jane Doe is actually Anna Kane. She's known mostly as the ex-wife of hockey player Evander Kane. So following this same pattern, Jay-Z's team filed a motion demanding Jane Doe make her name public. Here's what his team wrote. Admissions by the plaintiff, meaning Jane Doe, and damning admissions by her own father in a December 13 revelatory NBC interview cast yet further doubt on a claim that was obviously false from the start. The timeline, location, and occurrence of events alleged in plaintiff's complaint are rendered impossible by these admissions. She claims her father picked her up after the assault, and this next part they mean to write, he took a 5-hour trip. She claims she spoke with musician Benji Madden that night. He was not even in New York. She claims the assault took place at an after-party hosted in a private residence. Photos show Mr. Carter at an after-party at a nightclub. When pressed by NBC, plaintiff was forced to admit, "I've made some mistakes. I may have made a mistake in identifying. Not all faces there are as clear, and even that she was guessing about key details, including the time it took to reach the venue." What is more, she admits she does not have a single corroborating witness over the last 24 years. In this motion, Jay-Z's team calls for an immediate preservation order, suggesting that Tony Busby, Jane Doe's attorney, could destroy key evidence in the case. The filing even says there's a substantial risk that this may happen. So Jay-Z wants this preservation order, but if not that, he wants the lawsuit completely thrown out and dismissed. But the judge wasn't going for it. This is the spicy part of the motion we mentioned earlier. To start, she broke down the criteria for keeping a plaintiff's name out of a lawsuit, saying there are several key factors in play in Jane Doe's case. One, whether the litigation involves matters that are highly sensitive and of a personal nature. Two, whether identification poses a risk of retaliatory physical or mental harm to the party seeking to proceed anonymously, or even more critically, to innocent non-parties. Another risk, whether the plaintiff is particularly vulnerable to the possible harms of disclosure, particularly in light of her age, and whether the plaintiff's identity has thus far been kept confidential. Now, the motion lays out the pros and cons of keeping Jane Doe's name quiet. The judge notes, most importantly, plaintiff's continued anonymity may cause prejudice to defendants, making it more difficult for them to collect the facts necessary to mount a defense and, as appropriate, challenge plaintiff's credibility. But she says, nevertheless, at this exceedingly early stage in this case, the factors counseling against disclosure outweigh those that counsel in favor.
Fans idolized them as visionaries, self-made legends who transcended the music industry. But what's being uncovered now is rewriting that story entirely. The glamour, the power, the empire, it was all built on foundations that may have been darker than anyone imagined. And now, as Diddy faces a future behind bars, those foundations are crumbling, not just for him, but for everyone who stood beside him, because when one king falls, he takes his court down with him, and Jay-Z, whether he likes it or not, is being dragged into the spotlight. The truth is no longer something that can be hidden, it's bleeding out, one revelation at a time, and as the public starts to see what really went on behind those closed doors, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear: this isn't just the downfall of one man, it's the unmasking of an entire empire built on silence, fear, and secrets too dark to stay buried forever. The world thought they knew Diddy and Jay-Z, but the truth? It's only just beginning to surface. But there's one thing they can't control, the truth that's coming out piece by piece, because now, the narrative belongs to the people who were silenced for so long, the former employees who saw too much, the insiders who were forced into complicity, the victims who finally feel safe enough to speak. And what they're revealing isn't just shocking, it's monstrous.
That even though Bad Boy Records was dismissed off that complaint, Sean Carter and Sean Combs are both still named there. I also want to talk to you, Rich, about a point that Jay-Z's lawyer made previously, and that was that Tony Busby never even met with this Jane Doe, despite saying in that press conference back in October that his firm vetted all of the claims. What are your thoughts on that, given that Busby is standing behind Jane Doe and the allegations that she made?
Yeah, well, so Busby, or certainly somebody from Busby's office, should be meeting with these plaintiffs before bringing claims. I mean, you should always meet with your client before you go charging into court with a claim, but all the more so when they're salacious, provocative, inflammatory claims like the ones in this case. You do have an obligation to make sure there's a good faith basis for proceeding with the claims. You have to make sure there aren't any red flags that would indicate the claim is false or being concocted, just to extort the parties. You have to do some due diligence. And Busby runs a big firm, and he says he has 120 or so, that was the last number I heard, clients who are potentially bringing claims here. So I'm not saying he had to meet personally with her, but certainly somebody at his firm should have. And I don't know if that happened or not, but if they didn't, I would think they had a little explaining to do.
And do you think it was overly ambitious for him to tout that he was filing 120 lawsuits against Diddy with these big names attached, when really that number was lesser than that? And the only big name that he had added to these various complaints was Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z.
Yeah, well, remember what he was doing there, because that press conference and those announcements, those are not part of any court case that goes forward. No jury will ever hear about that. He was trying to generate clients and evidence. So he went public and said, I'm the guy. If you now, having heard what the world has heard about Sean Combs, if you now have a claim against him that you want to pursue, I'm the best position to do it, because I'm doing the work, I have all these clients. So if you have a claim, or if you have evidence, or somebody else who was at those parties that there should be claims against, come to my firm and talk to me. That was just a long-winded attorney advertisement. And I think that's one of the issues the defense lawyers have with him, is that he's sort of been doing, self-promotion and attorney advertising in the midst of litigating the case. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two. So I don't know how many clients he actually has. You are correct. The number of lawsuits is well under 120. There's also a possibility that some of those clients have reached settlements already that are just confidential and we don't know about. Again, I have no idea if that's true, but that could be one explanation as to why there are 120 clients and less than 20.
This isn't just about two powerful men losing everything. It's about a system that protected them for years, that rewarded their silence and their sins because they were too powerful to fail. But no one stays untouchable forever. Diddy's collapse has proven that. And if the rumors about what ties Jay-Z to this are even half true, he might be next in line. For decades, they built an image of power and success, moguls who conquered the world. But now, that image is cracking open to reveal the truth underneath. A legacy built not just on talent, but on secrecy, manipulation, and fear. As the investigations deepen and more evidence comes to light, one thing is clear: the empire they built together may be on the verge of complete collapse. The world once saw Diddy and Jay-Z as unstoppable forces, but every empire has a dark foundation, and when that foundation begins to rot, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing comes crashing down. What's happening now isn't just a scandal, it's a reckoning, a moment when power can no longer protect the truth, and the truth, once it's out, will change everything.